East Africa, we find a number of isolated mountain massifs towering the surrounding highlands. These mountains encompass demanding environmental development challenges, being the most densely populated area in East Africa. The fertile soils are intensively cultivated and harbor significant parts to the region's forest, rich of the biodiversity with often many endemic species. The mountain also serves as major water towers for the region, feeding the rivers and streams. Mount Elgon is one such mountain, located on the border between Uganda and Kenya, 100 kilometers north of Lake Victoria. The mountain, being 4,300 meters high with basal area of around 4,000 square kilometers, represent the eastern limit of various species of flora characteristic for tropical forests of Western Central Africa, and the western limit of various Afro-alpine species, which makes the area biologically significant on a global scale. The Ugandan part of the ecosystem is mainly regulated as a national park. Some estimated 1.5 to 2 million people live around the park on the Ugandan side. People on the drier northern side are traditionally agropastoralists, the Sabay increasingly sedentarized, growing maize, coffee and bananas. On the southern and western slopes, with densities up to 700 to 800 people per square kilometer, lives the Bagisu, a traditional agriculturalist group producing diverse crops with focus on coffee and bananas. All around the park, people find other ways of sustaining themselves besides farming, and the work often provides a better income. The University in Ås, together with the Faculty of Forestry at Makerere University in Kampala, have worked in Mount Elgon for almost 10 years, doing research within livelihoods, protected areas, governance, poverty and conflict management. During this time, some 10 to 15 master and PhD students have produced valuable studies, and a larger comparative research program is now also systematizing and producing research from Mount Elgon. Historically, people around Mount Elgon have had very strong relations to nature and to natural resources inside the park, and much indigenous knowledge of medicine plants and use of both wild foods, especially bamboo shoots, form a crucial part of local people's diet. The forest and its resources also play important roles in cultural rituals and are burial grounds for people's ancestors. Our research indicates that some 15 to 20% of people's total income is derived from the forest. And further, some of these incomes are essentials that are hard to substitute, such as water, medicine plants and energy. People's incomes were most likely twice this before the forest was made a national park in 1993. The shift in tenure had substantial effects on people's livelihoods, especially in the north, where the deprivation of especially pasture resources seems to have reduced livestock numbers by as much as 50%. In addition comes the loss of crops to raiding animals. These factors have turned the forest from being a major source of survival and livelihood to becoming a challenge for local people. From 1930 and up to 1970, Uganda was said to have the best forest management practices in tropical forestry. This, however, changed dramatically during the Civil War period from 1971 to 1986, when the forests in Mount Elgon were severely degraded, and there was a period of up to 30 years when local people enjoyed virtually unregulated use of the protected area, including large-scale agriculture encroachment, illegal logging, livestock grazing, and access to forest products. As much as 25,000 hectares was encroached by 1989, which could have hosted as much as 100 to 150,000 people, and at the same time, most of the larger wildlife became extinct on the Ugandan side of Mount Elgon. With the conversion to a national park in 1993 and with the eviction of these people over the last 10 years, conflicts have often involved violent confrontations, including evictions from the protected area, destruction of crops, livestock and property, court cases and even gun battles between armed poachers or cattle rustlers and rangers, leading to losses of life. The Bennett case, which we have studied in particular, shows how difficult these processes of eviction and compensation measures prove to be in practice. So what could be done? UWA has tried, with support from NORAD and IUCN, to introduce various measures to reduce tension, including outreach programs, community service initiatives and other measures. In 1996, a resource use agreement arrangement was negotiated with park-adjacent communities. Although results seem to be at the scale of relevance to local people compared to the outreach programs and other rather insignificant measures, it has proved difficult to get UWA to assume proper ownership and willingness to take these resource use agreements further. and to develop them into a revised park concept where local people really are assigned formal rights and issues of power relations are clarified. So where to go in the future? The present conflict levels in Mount Elgon are substantial and people feel deceived by the state and by their political representatives. Weapons of the weak are employed with feet dragging, sabotage of boundaries, illegal harvesting, poaching, and generation of local narratives with park hostile contents. The display window that one hoped Mount Elgon to be has instead become a window reflecting processes and outcomes generating future conflicts and prolonged struggle for survival and livelihood for the millions of people surrounding the park. Looking beyond Mount Elgon and at the global level, conservation of biodiversity resources by land protection under some form of protected area regime has expanded to some 17 million square kilometers, or some 12% of the total land areas, spread out over more than 100,000 individual areas. Obviously, when biodiversity conservation policies through land protection occupy more than 12% of the world's land resources, it is no longer a marginal environmental phenomena for especially interested people. It becomes a matter of common global economic and political concern, where much broader audiences must be invited in to discuss at global levels the architecture and direction of future policies. The case of Mount Elgon contains both disappointment and hope. Disappointment because projects attempting to improve social relations between park and people has proved difficult to implement in practice. It requires both competence and skills beyond the present delivery capacity and proficiency. Participation is about establishing social institutions through slow and cumbersome processes of social change. Hope lies in that the resource use agreement seemed to be an interesting policy option. They were on an economic scale of interest to people and with a content that could deliver politically more legitimate outcomes. And they point towards a right-based development, more self-empowerment and a sustainable use of resources compatible also with local people's livelihoods.